And we are live. Hi, everybody. Dr. Michael Dusa here with my guest. Actually, not a guest. He's a friend, Lance Stranahan from down in Florida. Hi, Lance.
How's it going?
Oh, it's always like a holiday here around these confines. You know that. I'm going to ramble for a couple seconds, then we're going to let you take the floor because you're the man of knowledge tonight. We're talking about brain health tonight. I wrote this. You guys saw some of my writings about brain health and some of the things you can do to improve your focus, your energy, your concentration, your feeling of well-being and mood. A lot of good stuff there. Lance really has a handle on this stuff. And, you know, even though I'm a doctor, the Latin and Greek translations of that mean teacher and scholar. Yeah, I could teach you some things. I also learn from you. I learn from people all the time. I try to surround myself with really smart people like Lance and a lot of other people and the parts of our advisory board. And basically, we cherry pick and take information where we must, and we build something for ourselves that's useful and helpful so we could live and feel better. That's what it's all about. Everyone here tonight, I thank you for visiting as always. Please let me know where you're checking in from. So if you do need some help on a one-on-one basis, maybe interpersonal basis, I could refer you to a healthcare practitioner in your area. Plus, I just like to know where everybody's from. Your questions, we will try to answer them, but if they are more involved or we just run out of time, I will get back to you personally via messenger. And make sure you share this. I think it's very important to get this information out to as many people as possible because we can help others be better. We help society be healthier, and it makes things easier for all of us. And everybody's happy. Don't you want to be around a bunch of happy people in general?
Yes.
And finally, I was just watching the end of a movie called Rudy, and a lot of you guys, Lance and I were talking about it. It's about this football player who was undersized, not very smart. He wanted to play at the University of Notre Dame, which is probably one of the best programs in the world. And everybody thought he was nuts. And he went into the Army, and then he worked a job. And a lot of years passed. He ended up becoming a college student in his late 20s in a junior college where he had to get the grades, get into Notre Dame. He finally did, but he couldn't make the team because he wasn't good enough. So they put him on like the scrub team where he'd get beat up every day. Long story short, by the time he was almost 30, they put him in the game at the very end of his last year, the last game, and the last play, and he sacked the quarterback, which is a big time thing. And if you ever watch it, you may cry, you may throw your arms up and feel that you are redeemed in life. But this just goes to show you, if you're here right now and you're having any problems in life, or you're buried under a pile of problems, or you lost your house, you lost your business, your girl left you, your dog bit you. You could ask me about that. I've gotten bit 4 times in the past 6 weeks. 4.
It was pretty serious.
The pain lets you know you're alive. But if you're having problems, you're sickly in health, you don't like how you look, you've been entrenched in sadness and depression and all these problems seemingly forever, and maybe you pulled out and you've been thrust back in it again. That movie Rudy, I think, shows that, you know, there's always deliverance if you can free your mind somehow free your mind. That's where it all happens right here. This is where the battlefield of the mind. Listen, it rages for me every single day. Denise will tell you, I have nightmares 2 or 3 times a week. And I don't even remember what they are, but there's some kind of tumult going on, and who knows? I deal with it, I manage it, but I think a lot of this stuff gets in my way. Lance and I were talking about procrastination and not getting, you know, lift off comes late, and I'm not going to say problems with that, but I deal with that all the time. So clarity of mind is the issue tonight. Brain health, focus, concentration, mood, anxiety, feeling of well-being. Lance has got some protocols that he follows, some supplements that he takes in combinations that really helps him, and he's noticed a difference. Hey, William, Rudy rules. It's a great story of getting in at a late age. That's right, Wolverine. William Whitlow, he kind of looks like Wolverine. He's ripped and he's got it going on. But maybe I get sick of those dogs that come after me all the time. But Lance, thanks again, man. You're a good friend, and Lance has a lot of information in his head. He's had a long life full of rich and varied experiences with many people from all walks of success in life. And he was a really good bodybuilder in younger years, and he's still in good shape now. And he's learned a lot, and he is here to share some of it with us regarding brain health. Lance, you had some deviations from what I just said, or did you have a little parable to give us, or how you started out or whatnot with all this?
A little parable. Well, as far as nootropics and some of that goes, I really got interested into the early 90s seeing a movie called The Lawnmower Man. And I was mentioning that to you. It's a film that had Pierce Brosnan, the guy that played James Bond, was in it. And it's a very similar theme to that other film that's based on the book Flowers for Algernon. But it's a guy that's like retarded. He has the mind of a child. And he cuts, people's lawns and things like that. And one of the guys he cuts the lawn for is a scientist. And this scientist works on these formulas, these brain-enhancing chemical formulas, and he decides to experiment on this retarded guy. And suddenly the guy starts getting more intelligent, and he uses it in conjunction with these virtual reality machines, and he gives them higher doses. And the guy not only becomes intelligent, he becomes like a genius, and he can think, 3 or 4 steps ahead. And then it goes into real science fiction, because then he gets telepathic powers and he gets, psychic abilities. But it kind of got me, thinking along, because they mentioned the word nootropics in it. And then I just started researching a little bit, and it just got me to thinking, wouldn't it be better if, I was so interested in bodybuilding for many years and worked out, and, what if you could enhance your brain? What if there are certain substances that made you think quicker, made your memory better, made you focus better? Because I did have some issues in high school and grade school. I think I would have been called an ADHD. I could focus on reading Joe Weider's magazines. But math and some of these subjects, I didn't do that well. And I just, I would draw pictures in class and just never really had a lot of focus. And I found out later on some of the symptoms of that are also just not following through with projects. So researched a lot. And what you come up with back then in the 90s, they were talking about a class of drugs called the racetams. Those were the first real nootropic type drugs. But the thing is, back then you couldn't just go order them. It's not like now where it's kind of easy to get. They had some places in Germany or Europe, but it was very difficult. So just over the years, just got more reading, and I found that there's a lot of vitamins, amino acids that if you combine them properly in the right doses, you can get a pretty profound effect. You can really increase, I would go so far as to say, your drive, your motivation, everything. Because you're involving these amino acids, vitamins, they help enhance your certain brain chemicals, your neurotransmitters. And when you start learning which each neurotransmitter does and which nutrient enhances it and how you can balance them all together, suddenly, you'll find yourself, like I was a big procrastinator, had trouble completing tasks, and just through trial and error, using these substances, keeping journals, for many years, I've kept journals. I took this combination. This was the effect I had. And it's been made, like I told you, fairly recent where I really feel I've kind of come along and really optimized this where, wow, now I'm not procrastinating. Now, if I want to sit down and I'm supposed to write a couple of pages of maybe a book I'm working on, I can get through that much easier than before. I'd start and it's like, wow. And even silly things like my girlfriend will cook a dinner. There's all the dishes and everything. And I would always just kind of sit there, let her clean it up. I'm actually motivated now to pick up, clean the dishes, do things. And I hate to waste any minute. And just, I feel a big change. So some people that think, well, when somebody procrastinates or they're not finishing tasks.
Can I stop you there for 1 second? When you say procrastination and you have this task you want to begin, is it because I like to get to the root of it, because I get things done, but I don't intentionally waste time, but looking back, there's a lot of time that's lost and I'll get it done, but it takes way too long. When you procrastinate, are there many other thoughts that are kind of intervening and getting in the way? So is this a matter of clearing those out of the way so you can focus on one thing?
Well, I think in my case, it's just like some of it could be psychological in my case, because as a kid, I had a very regimented father. And every minute of the day, I had to be either practicing golf, then it was off to the karate lesson, then it was off to the piano lesson. So every minute of the
folks, Lance's father was one of the best golfers in the world. It wasn't just some local guy cracking the whip. It was, he played with Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus. I'll say it for you, Lance, because we don't want you, not that you would, people may assume you're pontificating or something. Of course, you're not.
But a part of this is probably like when I feel like there's something I'm supposed to do, it's like, okay, I just like, well, I'll get around to that in a little bit. And it just suddenly, and that's part of it. But I think the other part is the same thing that causes some of these other disorders like attention deficit disorder. It's a lack of general amount of dopamine in the brain. Dopamine is what really enhances that drive, makes you want to attack a task, gives you pleasure. There's a lot of things, and most drugs that they use to treat ADHD work on that pathway, the dopamine pathways. And again, if you can enhance that with substances that are fairly safe, I think that's a good way to go. So again, dopamine is one of those neurotransmitters that I think, and I really has helped with procrastination. But
just
focus.
I'm sorry, just a couple. I like to jump in and read the. I don't like to ignore the folks. So, two of the best around, Mike and Lance. Especially when people say that, I have to call it out. Rudy Easley, one of the best movies ever. Steve Umberger, Stephen Ross, Stephen from Cincinnati. Good stuff. Hi, Steve. And Steve Umberger. Lance's dad was a legend, so he does perceive himself. So I'm sorry. So what about serotonin? You mentioned dopamine. That's a factor too.
Right. Well, serotonin, they probably wouldn't classify that neurotransmitter as being like for nootropic purposes, but I believe once you start boosting certain neurotransmitters, you should have a balance. I don't think it's good to boost dopamine, and then, serotonin affects a lot your sleeping patterns, your moods. A lot of the drugs they treat people that are depressed with are SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and all that, which can have a lot of side effects. I would try to avoid it and try something natural first. But in part of what I do, along with enhancing the dopamine through things like tyrosine and substances like that, serotonin can be enhanced with 5-HTP tryptophan. That's one thing that works well with that. And that gives you a nice balanced mood, Well,
you mentioned your stack, which we'll get to in a second. But I do want to ask you, if you were you're on this your little stack as you call it, and let's say we have a person who, I always say as far as supplements go, natural supplements. A kid came up to me in the gym. I always make it sound like it just happened. This was a while back, and he told me 5 different supplements he was taking, and the kid was maybe 40 pounds overweight. He was, he's strong, but I don't care. That's just not healthy. Okay, well, let's just talk about health for a second. I'm not talking about being swole and all that. And so I think throwing these natural supplements into the mix when your so-called fertile ground is not so fertile or healthy is not going to help you that much, especially when let's say you have high cholesterol, high blood pressure. You're bordering on obese, or you are obese. You've got a list of bad habits as long as my arm. Is this stuff going to? Well, number one, is it going to help? And number two, are you even going to be able to meter where your results are coming from when there's so many other factors?
It depends on a few things. First of all, some people have lack of focus, lack of motivation. They're depressed, anxious, and a lot of it has to do, if it's not genetic, some people are. What about their lifestyle? What are they doing? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they drinking, excessive alcohol every night? That certainly is going to deplete your neurotransmitters. If you drink really heavily night after night, you're not going to pop a couple of vitamins and amino acids and feel better. What
about that one glass of red wine, resveratrol, that you're now hearing touted as oh so healthy for you? Would that be a factor interfering with these things, even though it's only one glass?
I don't think it would, but there's always those people that really say, I'll have one glass, and then the bottle's sitting there, and it's like, man, I feel really good. Let me why should I only drink one? What's 2 glasses going to do to me? I'll have 2. I got half that bottle left, and it's really hard for some people who really like it, and because what happens? You start feeling good, and you like the taste. And it's like, why do I want that experience to suddenly stop now? I'm not ready to go to bed. I want to have, so yeah, if technically you have the discipline, or like me, I have a safe, by the way, that I can put things in it and dial it in, and they won't open till whatever date I want. I have a safe. So let's just say I had something I liked, but I didn't want to overindulge. I put it in the safe. But no, let's say you don't have a safe. Then your discipline is your safe.
Discipline, right?
Yeah, 1 glass. I doubt it would be harmful to you if you can keep it at that. But I'm saying people that are drinking a lot, and even caffeine to some extent, if you're drinking tremendous amounts all day long, you can really deplete your dopamine. It also depletes something called adenosine. And again, you want to look where your lifestyle is. Am I getting sleep? Am I really emotionally stressed? Am I drinking too much? Because no, it'll be a little hard to overcome that with a couple of supplements.
Hey, Lance, to your knowledge, the hypercaffeination, drinking way too much coffee, and maybe even some of these monster drinks, or if you're overly fond of ephedrine-like substances, and the resultant adrenal fatigue, can that cause problems with what you're trying to do with the nootropics?
Yeah, I think so. I think a better strategy is to take smaller amounts of caffeine and mix it with an amino acid called L-theanine. Theanine is something that actually will balance out, and it's actually sold now as a nootropic. It's basically, it kind of eliminates some of the problems with caffeine while actually enhancing and maintaining the positive effects, the increased energy, that slight feeling of euphoria, but it gets rid of any type of anxiety. It gets rid of spikes, and you'll have much lower spike. Some people get their blood pressure spiked if they belt a real big giant cup of coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Theanine with it actually increases your focus. It reduces any type of crash. It's great to feel really hyper, but then some people feel like, they get a big letdown.
Terrible.
Better to drink, like I grind my own beans. I happen to like coffee, but I try not to get that huge spike not very often. I'll drink like a half a cup. I'll take a theanine capsule with it, maybe wait a half hour, have another half cup. So I don't get that big jolt, but I never crash, and I just have sustained energy from it, sustained focus. So part of what I do, there is caffeine in it. You don't have to.
Are you able to, Denise, for instance, can drink coffee all day and go to sleep? She goes to sleep in like 10 seconds.
Well, people build up a tolerance to it. I've never drank so much, and I used to be fairly sensitive. See, some of the things when people talk about green tea, they say, well, there's caffeine in it, and I don't get as jittery from green tea as I do from coffee. Do you know why? Because it naturally contains L-theanine in it.
Yeah, that's the main source. I think.
Came up with the idea of let's put that in a capsule and make it a little higher potency and mix it with caffeine, and it works pretty well. So, I mean, there's basic things you can accomplish with amino acids like tyrosine, Acetyl-L Carnitine, which affects another neurotransmitter which is acetylcholine.
Right.
Most of that neurotransmitter is what's responsible for memory, the speed of your brain processing. When you think of it, the brain is a little bit like a computer. And the acetylcholine is how fast your brain is processing, how you recall, how you like if you wanted to speed up a computer, a lot of the old solutions was just to add a few gigabytes of memory sticks into it.
There's evidence that system is degraded as you get older. Thus, you're losing focus, cognition, memory, recall. All that, is that from your knowledge? Is that what you've read as well?
It's true, and I think one of the ways to really prevent a lot of cognitive decline is to take some of these nutrients, which are helping your body manufacture its own neurotransmitters, rather than substituting them with some sort of synthetic chemical. Tyrosine is like a raw material for a precursor to dopamine. It converts to dopa and then dopamine,
right.
Acetyl-Carnitine. See, it's not the same as some people say, oh, carnitine, I used to take that before I did cardio, I'd burn more fat. Acetyl-L Carnitine is a little bit different. It's been modified so it crosses what's called the blood-brain barrier.
Blood-brain barrier, right.
Carnitine has a very low threshold of crossing that blood-brain barrier. So you take acetyl-L Carnitine, that converts to acetylcholine. And that's the pathway that a lot of the Racetam, the more potent synthetic nootropic drugs do. They work on that acetylcholine. For the most part, that's where a lot of their mechanism is. And they can have some pretty strong effects. They are that you buy at a health food store, the Racetam drugs. Go ahead.
I just want to say hello to Frank Ferry. Hi, Frank. And Paul Sedlacek. I see your post, Paul, when you can't sleep at 3 a.m. And yours often sucks to sleep. Hey, Paul, just write, if you're still with us, just pop down a couple of reasons why you think that might be happening. Maybe we could address those for you, or may resonate with me, because I have listen, I know when I've gone into REM sleep, I could feel it. And, that occurs within the first 1 or 2 hours of sleep. And that's the true restful sleep, where your body's releasing the growth hormone that you need. And I could tell when I don't get in it. And, ordinarily I go to bed early and wake up early. But then I get thrown off that rhythm. Whenever I'm thrown off the circadian rhythm and the body is no longer thriving on that regularity, I wake up, I could tell just by the way I feel as to whether I had good deep sleep or that surface sleep, which is more like just resting. Do you experience that at all, Lance? Or you sleep well?
I suffered with insomnia many years ago for a period, and it was pretty rough. Some of it I felt was actually from just being, believe it or not, when your body's exhausted physically and your adrenals are misfiring, you can actually just, it can affect your nervous system. And I think sometimes the best thing to do is, what I do really that helps me a lot lately is that I take a Kava Extract.
Oh, yeah.
You heard of people that go to those Kava bars. It's a Hawaiian thing.
Yeah.
And it's an extract that's in an alcohol-based form and little liquid droppers. And I drop about 3 or 4 droppers of this product in a glass of water.
Is that like a homeopathic?
I wouldn't say it's homeopathic. It's more herbal. It's very potent. And then I take like a sublingual melatonin spray or a dropper of liquid melatonin, maybe up to 4 to 5 milligrams. And about a half hour before bed, I find that to be very, very helpful. But if somebody's drinking tremendous amounts, again, of caffeine, even though they may not feel like they're being energized during the day by the caffeine, it can have a cumulative effect. And
I think
alcohol late at night. I mean, like you can drink a lot of wine or something and you'll start passing out on the couch, but then halfway through the night you wake up and it affects your blood sugar. I mean, there's a lot of causes. You can have low blood sugar, hypoglycemic in the middle of the night. You can have, lots of different things happen. So it all depends on the person.
What do you think of the suggestion, Lance? This kind of ties into this, where, that old conundrum, overweightedness causes low T causes overweightedness. Who knows which one it is, but lack of sleep or poor sleep retards proper testosterone secretion, and it can lead to lower levels over time. Do you know anything about that? You've read anything? Do you buy into that at all?
Yeah, I do buy into that. I definitely buy into that. I think lack of sleep, again, is something that definitely could lower your testosterone. I think there's things people do that causes more of their testosterone to aromatize to estrogen when you get older. There's certain factors. There's also supplements that can help that. But yeah, not sleeping properly, being overweight, sure. That actually increases the aromatase enzyme that would convert to estrogen.
Lance just intimated, maybe even just superficially. It made me think of, and people ask about this often, human growth hormone and testosterone boosters over the counter are worthless. So, as far as taking an organic, natural supplement in hopes of boosting your body's production. Now,
I will say one thing on that. To get a noticeably measurable difference in your total testosterone, I would say most of these things will not do much of anything. However, there are some things, believe it or not, and I have noticed effects on myself, that I think they actually free up more testosterone. You have your total testosterone and you're free. So let's say, there's things like Avena sativa, boron, zinc, certain minerals. There's things that will actually lower, I think it's SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin,
right?
Keeps the testosterone bound without being biologically active in your body. So you may not raise your hormones, but believe it or not, that little bit of extra biologically activated testosterone, I have taken some of these supplements and seen a big boost in libido.
Well, Lance, and you and I have discussed this at length, and I've taken your advice on some of these things. I will say zinc, for instance, is very powerful as a supplement if you are lacking zinc, and then you're only supplanting what you're lacking. The misinterpretation by a lot of people is by taking natural supplements, you're going to reach a state of supra, as in above, supra health or supra physiology, which is really a drug-like effect. But with supplements, what you're doing is you're improving or optimizing your body's homeostasis, meaning letting all your systems be enabled to produce the way they should. And then if they don't, there may be something else blocking, your levels or your proper production. So I think obviously,
in an ideal world, if you're eating a balanced diet and you're getting everything, you shouldn't be deficient in zinc. But think about, first of all, a lot of the soils where you get fruits and vegetables and things, they're deficient in minerals. Some of the animals that you're eating and the eggs and stuff, they're eating GMO foods. And it's just, I think you can still get deficient even when you're eating a halfway decent thing. So I think it's always a good idea to take a little extra zinc, along with a good multivitamin to make sure you're not missing any nutrients, because it's easy to get deficiencies nowadays just from the environment we're living in. And then there's environmental estrogens out there too that may be somewhat responsible for, they say people in their 30s now have lower testosterone than their fathers did like another generation ago. So why is that? Is it in the environment? And I made they have those wimpy guys in the colleges, and I won't go into all that.
Oh man, you could, but they say that testosterone has decreased in society by 1% every year over the past 25 years. And who knows? I mean, you got chemtrails. Speaking of food, look what they do to the food now. Now they're getting these deals with these foreign countries where they can ship meat over here and they don't have to print on the package the country of origin. So you don't even know where it's coming from, what they're doing to it. You made a good point about farming. The soil's been leached to the point where, it may say something on the package. Are you getting that? You just don't know. So what do I say? I say blood panels, blood tests. I get mine done relatively frequently. I know you do. Most people don't. It's hard to convince them to do that, to know where you
my own tests, and then if I see something wrong, then I'd probably consult with somebody. But
when you say you do them on your own, you go to a site where you can order your own. Is that correct?
Sites, and then you order. Let's say you wanted a panel that's like a wellness panel. Tells you all your lipid levels. Would tell you your kidney functions, your liver function, blood sugar, blood cells, full blood count. Most all the pertinent information you want for about $80, $90 or even sometimes. And they send you a requisition that orders the test. You go to Quest Labs. So, you're getting a legitimate laboratory doing it. They draw your blood. And then within less than a few days, you get the results back. And then you can see if it has a reading that's out of the norm.
What's the name of that site? We'll give it a plug.
Oh, there's a few out there. I use one called Direct Labs usually.
Direct Lab. Yeah, you directed me to that, actually.
And Quest is starting to do it on their own where you can order things. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I got a COVID antibody from Quest Labs last week to see because I had gotten sick in January, and I heard that the virus was here early in Florida. I was rarely sick, and I had a pretty bad, but it turns out it said I didn't have the antibody. So,
well, that's good. You're okay then, man.
Better if I had it, then I'd be immune and I wouldn't have to worry.
I was worried. I was going to make you wear a mask on this little video that we're doing, man. It might be a whole new deal. Hey, listen, Tom Reebstock, I knew you'd remember, Top. Hi, Steve. Good to see you. So Paul got back to us on the check. I would say relaxing my mind is tough when I try to go to sleep. My wife falls asleep, no problem. That's Denise, too. She's out in 10 seconds, which makes it worse for me mentally. Why, Paul? You should wish only goodness for your wife. You don't want her to stay up with you and that little dog of yours too, Cashmere.
She's not going to sleep. Right?
What's that?
If I can't sleep, she's not going to sleep.
Yeah, not in our bed. I do like my caffeine too, but not extreme, I would say. Well, those are some. Look, you got to be able to get to sleep somehow. And I've always said, it's just like when I had patients. I
never did after like 2 PM.
You won't drink coffee after 2?
Well, not generally. I don't really need it, but I like to have it early in the day. And then I feel like from the other things I take, I'm pretty sustained for the rest of the day. I mean, it is occasional. Let's say I'm on vacation and was doing something and they offered you a little cup of coffee, but I never drink it at night, though. Never.
No. Well, I got to say, I drink it for its medicinal effect. I don't really like how it tastes. But going back to getting to sleep, it's like when I had active pain patients, they were in such pain that their mechanics would be aberrant. And then with bad mechanics, they'd have more pain. So this vicious cycle, somehow, if I couldn't correct it naturally, I would get them prescribed some type of pain medication just to get rid of the pain initially so they could reestablish good movement and then let the body do it. And it's the same thing with sleeping. Somehow you have to start a chain or a consistency of good regular sleep, because if you don't, whatever other noxious processes you've got going on, they're never going to relent until you get that sleep. It's 1/3 of your life. And Steve, I'm just tuning in. Any advice for night shift workers? I sleep good during the week. Weekends mess me up. I switch to sleeping at night, but when I go to work for Sunday night at 11:30, I drag ass for a day. Any advice? Yeah, it's a circadian rhythm issue. What do you think of that, Lance, as far as when you're flip-flopping like that and the physiology is always being challenged at different times of the day?
That's a rough one, because I guess some of those people in Alaska where it's like night all the time or light all the time, they deal with something like that. I guess you just have to do things in reverse and act like, when your evening is your day and treat it as such. And then, sleep in the day, wear those little blinders.
That's like one of those, you mentioned that the dark, I read a statistic, who knows how accurate, it might have been spoken a little bit of jocularity, although I don't think it was funny. They said the number one area in the country, the United States, for doctors committing suicide was Seattle and their dentists. Everyone hates the dentist, and it's always dark and murky in Seattle. So it's one of these issues of seasonal affective disorder, which I've read with some of these nootropics, they can help with that, establishing better mood and whatnot.
Seasonal, SAD, seasonal affective disorder. Yeah, that's, I think, like I'm lucky in Florida, we don't get quite as much as that because the weather's pretty similar all year round. But in other places, you definitely get that. And anything that, again, is balancing your neurotransmitters is probably going to help with that.
Right.
If your serotonin levels are balanced properly, because that's the one that's really helps with depression. Helps and melatonin actually converts a lot to serotonin. So if you're taking melatonin at night and a little 5-HTP during the day, you should have a pretty good balanced amount of that. And tyrosine actually boosts your mood. So if I was there, I would be taking a little bit more of that to get my dopamine levels elevated during that period when it's just bleak. You probably get a little of that in Connecticut. How do you deal with it?
Listen, I'm a big tanner. I lay in a tanner bed almost every day. Heliotherapy, I call it. And frankly, listen, UVB rays are blocked when it's really dark here. It's hard enough. I've got dark skin, so I probably don't absorb as well as the average person. So I get out in the sun, but I lay in a tanner bed. Listen, it establishes a feeling
of sun or some sort of ultraviolet light.
Well, I need it.
With this disorder, correct?
Yeah, I notice a marked difference. Like today, I like to use the example Bosnia because Bosnia always seems like it's, from what I see in the media, it's a great place. I'm sure there's some wonderfulness there as well, but maybe it's misbegotten and gray for the most part. But we get that a lot.
Yeah, how dare you?
Yeah, I know. I'm going to have the League of Bosnians march on me now. Hey, Lance, let me ask you a question. What you mentioned, you're right now, you've got a stack of GABA, theanine, L-carnitine, tyrosine, and the 5-HTP tryptophan. That's a good stack working for you. However, with the average it's very hard to do this because everybody's different. We don't do cookie cutter. But just as a primer or something for a person who would want to look into this and consider this, what would you say is a good way to start for somebody to maybe try something as far as nootropic or some type of stack or something just to begin and see how they react?
Well, yeah, some of those ones you mentioned are fairly mild, but they do work pretty effectively. I mean, people, that's a good place to start. Now, some of them, again, I don't like to tell people what to take because some people are sensitive to certain things. Like, for example, I like tyrosine, but some people, it might, if they have high blood pressure, for example, anything that boosts dopamine or even boosts, epinephrine, which it does to some extent. Anything that boosts that can raise blood pressure. So it's kind of contraindicated if you had uncontrolled high blood pressure.
By the way, for everyone listening, and I do have a disclaimer printed somewhere here, we do not offer advice here, just information that you're to take and digest somehow. Always check with your doctor because, listen, not only do we not know you, you may not know you. You may not know what's going on with you. You may interpret it. I used to have people come in with back pain, and I wouldn't just say it was muscle. It could be an infection. It could be a kidney infection or a tumor referring pain. It was not a tumor most times, but still, you've got to be very careful with that. So I'm sorry, Lance, you can continue. So it's not advice. We're just offering information.
Right. But basically that is something if you are a coffee drinker, I would first add that L-theanine amino acid to it. Right. It will enhance the positive effects of the caffeine. If you're not a coffee drinker, it's okay. You don't need to take it. So theanine is mainly more something that I would use with caffeine. So if you're not drinking coffee, tyrosine, very good for boosting that dopamine, for giving you more focus, more ability to want to complete tasks, more motivation. If your memory, you feel like your memory is not what it used to be, you want your brain to work faster, that's where the Acetyl-L Carnitine would come in. I take about 500 milligrams, sometimes a little more, like a second dose during the day. The 5-HTP we talked about was for serotonin, raising that. And the GABA is something I just started adding in. It's not something that you absorb a lot of. Again, it's not one of these things that crosses the blood-brain barrier, but even a little bit seems to enhance everything else in there. the GABAergic is what some of the benzodiazepine class of drugs affect. Now, you wouldn't think, why would I want something that's calming along with the motivation? Believe it or not, again, in this, they have a synergistic effect. Now, there used to be a form of GABA that was bound to niacin called picamilin that was discovered in Russia. All the top chess players, all the top people that needed to really concentrate, they gave it to research scientists. Read a lot of research about that, but the niacin somehow chemically bound to that made it cross the blood-brain barrier. Wow. So GABA does enhance focus and concentration. Not,
I read that's also big. You mentioned chess players, jet fighter pilots, where they need that exacting concentration. I thought that was pretty interesting. They say they rely or depend on it.
I've read that they take things such as like modafinil, which is an alertness drug,
right.
Which is a very stimulating drug. So yeah, they might, and then we can get into, if people want to take this further, there is a whole other class of nootropics called the Racetam drugs,
right?
Paracetam and Aniracetam, and some of these. They're very potent, and again, they're kind of a gray market area. Like if you go into your health food store and you say, "Can I get a bottle of this?" They don't have it generally. And if you go to Amazon, I don't even think you can order it on Amazon.com. But there's sites that sell it and all that. And that's what a true nootropic chemical is. These are synthetic things that, again, enhance neurotransmitters. A lot of that research was done in Russia as well. They were really ahead of the game when it came to a lot of this brain-enhancing stuff.
It's funny.
For the
mentioning the modafinil. It was in that article, that ebook that you referred me to a couple of years ago, and that was a big thing. Is that over the counter or no? That's also difficult to get.
No, that's more difficult to get than the. There's remember they used to sell pro hormones?
Oh yeah.
It wasn't really a hormone, but it would supposedly convert into one.
Right.
And you would so they make something like that. I think it's called adrophenol.
It's like a precursor.
Right. You take it and your body converts some of it into the. So I think you can get that, again, on the same sites where you'd get the paracetams and things like that.
Right.
I've used some of those paracetams. I think they work well. I think what they do is they really make your receptors and your acetylcholine really fire out more. It's a more potent. You're forcing your body really to produce it, so you get a stronger effect. And but you can, after a period of time, get the opposite effect. At least I did, and I've read some other accounts where you you feel like you have brain fog.
Because your body attenuates or
discharged so much of your neurotransmitters that, and again, it helps to take some things like choline, which replenishes, but I like to use some of that on an occasional basis, maybe once or twice a week, on a day when I just want to go really full bore. I'll use something called phenylpiracetam, which is a very stimulating compound. But I don't use it very often. You can build up a tolerance quickly to it. So for me, using something like that once or twice a week in conjunction with just my, vitamins, amino acids, that seems to really work well. And again, everybody has to if they do get involved in this, I recommend keeping a journal, taking a minimal dose to start out, see how that affects you. And then you can always adjust things. But, and again, if you have blood pressure issues and things, you don't want to take things that are too stimulating.
Do you
and stuff?
Do you that's the individual due diligence. They got to make sure they've got a clean bill and tell their doctor.
Research. I'm just giving a couple of things what I do and give some information. But ultimately, to me, I did research, then I experimented because I feel I'm very sensitive. Like someone would say, well, that's not scientific. You wrote how you felt and what your results were. How do you know you just didn't automatically spontaneous? I don't really worry about that. I feel I know myself, I know my body, I know my brain. And once I came upon combinations that worked well, I journaled that. What dose, how many days in a row. Because believe it or not, after many, many days in a row, not even many, maybe a month, I noticed you don't feel the same effect from some of these substances.
Really?
Yes. And I think you attenuate, you just, whatever, it just doesn't seem to work the same. So there's a couple of options there. Like, let's say I'm taking tyrosine, which stimulates your dopamine, correct?
Yes.
So let's say I'm just not feeling that same level of focus, that motivation, everything that was working so great the first few weeks. There's ways around that. Your body's obviously used to, you could increase the dose, I suppose. But I also switched to something else called, have you ever heard of Mucuna pruriens? It's also known as the dopa bean.
I've heard of it, yes.
A bean that naturally, strangely enough, contains L-dopa, which is a direct precursor to dopamine.
Wow. Is that easily procured, that type of bean? Or?
You can get that in the health food stores.
Oh.
It's also rumored, I don't know, to raise growth hormone levels slightly. It's in all those, bogus growth hormone releasing. I don't get it for that, but it actually, so it's doing it through a kind of a different pathway than the L-tyrosine. So some of the things that have worked for me is I'll switch off to that. And that way I don't have to have days where I'm not getting any effect. Whereas if I just stayed on the tyrosine.
Right.
Acetyl-L Carnitine, I noticed this with my father. That was something I actually used on my dad when he was I told you he was in a car accident when he was around 75 or 6. Hit his head pretty hard. And between that and possible in our family a genetic history of Alzheimer's, he started getting memory loss, cognitive problems.
Wow.
And I had to have full-time care. He couldn't put his shirt on properly, all this stuff. And he was rapidly going downhill. And knowing that acetylcholine is very important in your memory and in these things, I just found this liquid form because he didn't want to swallow pills at that point. So I found, and it was very hard to find, this liquid acetyl-L carnitine, and I would give him a few tablespoons and have his caregiver do that. And I would see him several times a week to take him to the gym and things like that. And I noticed an immediate improvement. I mean, we could carry on normal conversations, and I'd say, hey, and I would give him quotes. He used to love quotes because he would run, marathons. And while you're running for hours, it's boring. So he would go over these quotes.
Mantras.
He'd have some from Oscar Wilde, like, there's only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.
Right.
So we'd be in the car while he had his full dementia, and I'd say, there's only one thing worse in the world than being talked about. And he'd say, and that's not being talked about. And I mean, the quotes. And, but I noticed after a few months that he'd start going back. So, in his case, I would just kind of cut it out for a few weeks and then start giving it to him again. And I'd see the benefits happen all over. And for about 4 to 5 years, just giving him this one substance, because I didn't want to, I put him on that Aricept. Hardly anyone back then was making any progress in Alzheimer's or anything with that. And for about 4 or 5 years, up till when he died, he didn't really decline that much. He's kind of just leveled out. I really believe it was from boosting that acetylcholine, which affects your memory. And then I found out, and I didn't even know this, that there was a study in Italy where they were giving that to cognitively impaired dementia patients and saw improvement with it. So I kind of did that, and then I found out later on there was a study that backed it up. But at the time, I didn't really know it.
Did your father, after he hit his head in a car accident at age 75, 76, was he able to get back to competitive running or lifting or anything like that? Or he just
he still worked out. And in fact, about, it wasn't for a couple years after I really saw the effect, So you can bang your head and then have, as you're older, maybe cognitive problems as a delayed effect. Again, I don't know for sure, but I don't think that helped. Again, and it's just like Ronald Reagan, when he was shot, his lung collapsed. I think he was deprived of oxygen. And later on, he was still good enough to carry out his term.
Yeah.
And still was, but you could see he was starting to slip a little bit towards the end of his if you probably remember, we're old enough to remember Ronald.
Oh, I remember it. Yeah.
But then he got severe Alzheimer's and everything. And I always wondered, was it maybe partially because he got shot and had that oxygen deprivation and all that? But
I say, just to interject, injury is kind of like you got a windshield and you ever get a crack in your windshield. It starts off real small and really slowly over time it starts to go across, and it then it finally impugns the whole of you. At first, no, but then over time, you regress because of that, because it proliferates.
Well, it's like your entire system. They call that an insult to your cellular system.
Oh, yeah.
And there's all various ways we can do that throughout life. These little insults, they call that, little damages, little things, and they accumulate. And that's the less you can have, and the more. Some of them cause free radical damage. There's a lot of different things.
Oh, yeah.
Back when that life extension book came out, that was the big thing, the free radical theory of aging. And then they've come up with the telomerase and the this and that. And so there's a lot of different theories, but all of them have some merit. So you can always learn from, extract information from lots of these theories for your own longevity program. But
the difficulty of all that is, as you go through life and you lose the biofeedback and you're used to not feeling good, and you get these compounding injuries and insults, as you say, and these free radicals that build up. Ultimately, the body, all the while, the immune system's fighting that and holding it at bay, so you think you're okay until it finally relents because it could no longer protect you. Then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you maybe have numbness, or you're dragging your leg because that tumor got big enough to push on that part of the brain that interferes. And it's not something that just happened. It's, many times people live lives so far afield of good general health. I'm not talking about living like Jack LaLanne either.
You could have so much inflammation in your nervous system that your immune system attacks that inflammation, and that's how you end up with arthritis or and if it attacks your nervous system, multiple sclerosis. But a lot of it wasn't your immune system suddenly went bananas. It's because you had this inflammation and your body sees that as something that's foreign. And the inflammation, again, could be because your adrenals aren't producing enough cortisol, your own anti-inflammatory hormones.
Yeah, inflammation is a response. It's a response to noxious stimuli, or it's a response to, your organal system is supposed to work in harmony. Lungs, the heart, the spleen, intestines, the gallbladder, the liver, the kidneys, everything. The lungs works together. But if one is compromised, the other ones work harder, and you no longer have this balance. And you get, one of the responses is inflammation. It's a chronic kind of low level inflammation that you don't necessarily notice, but it makes you decrepit and you're living at a lower level over time. Listen, I was on with Zucolato, and he was saying that he could just look at a person and tell, maybe not inflammation directly, but he could tell just by looking at them that they're not working out, they're low testosterone, the whole picture. And that happens, and like you were intimating earlier, lower testosterone across the board now. That's kind of the type of product, human, that's being produced. The girls are thick now, which you and I would maybe say, hey man, that's fat. No malice against anyone in particular. I love everyone, but we've also got to attend to good health indices. And if there's too much of you, your heart one day will say, hey man, I'm going to take a break today. And that means you're laying in the pine box. So that's a little extreme, but still.
I'll tell you, people will do things. I think people get so caught up in talking about women wanting now to be, thick and all that. It's just, they go by these trends. It's like back in the 70s, they had this thin trend, and they went to this, and then, and the styles all across the board. Everybody wanted to just go by what they're considered in. And I've always thought, if something was attractive at one time, it still basically is, and I don't think, because this group of people, there was a movie that featured this person and they had a giant rear end, and it's like, wow, the Kardashians. And it's like, I got to have a woman like that now. Never wanted it my whole life, but because this show's popular and these guys love it, man, something must be wrong. I mean, and especially if it's looks artificial, like, hers happens to. I mean, I don't think something natural that's different, but,
Well, somebody will say, hey, that's not in style. And I'm like, well, like some of the things I wear, listen, I have stuff from the 80s and maybe even the 70s that I'll still throw on sometimes. And, I wear my spandex. Somebody said they're underwear. I didn't even know they were underwear, but I know I can see my legs when I'm working them. And plus, if you're paying attention to my ass, there's a problem here. It ain't with me. So, and Paul Sedlacek just reminded us that would be the Kardashians. Yes. And I don't know, man, they're great marketers, and they influence a lot.
Society as a whole, I just find it so silly that we get programmed to, we've got to like this. Now it's,
Listen, I'm glad I'm kind of, I'm not with it with all the, I don't watch TV. I really don't. I watch pay movies, and I don't like to even see commercials because things are being forced upon me. They're telling you this is what you're supposed to. Are you kidding me? Listen, I'm still doing the same things I did 30 years ago. I don't need all this change all the time. The human body doesn't respond to change with all these new programs and new things. And
they've learned through imagery and music to make the most horrific things seem okay. Like, how many of these pharmaceutical drug commercials have you seen?
Oh, man.
Beautiful family, and they're playing in the park, and this beautiful music's going, and they're swinging. And he goes, may cause death and diabetes and heart attacks and blood
leakage.
And it's like, and they're saying it in this nice, pleasant tone, and you hear the music, and they're like, yeah, I want some of that,
Hey, Lance, why those commercials? Why? I think I understand marketing fairly well, but why? Oftentimes they never tell you what the product is. They just, have this weird kind of. I mean, you're kind of from the film world and whatnot. What's the whole thing behind that? Are they trying to entice someone into researching it more, or?
I think that's a good point. It's called a tease. I just saw something. My brain, all it picked up is that I saw something really I liked. It was pleasant. It was nice. I'm being conditioned as we speak, like Pavlov's dog. I don't really know what it's for, but I'm interested. They teased me. Now, next time they might reveal a little more. It's just like, you ever seen a preview to a movie? They sometimes have like that 10-second clip. It's like, whoa. And then they show the full preview later on.
Yes.
So you get the little tease at first. And, or maybe it's something that, they just don't want to tell you the title of it yet. I don't know. It's, it seems like it's a tease.
I think the best way is the hope that you can go through life and just not need too many extraneous things outside the body as far as synthetics go. I read somewhere the average family medicine cabinet has 17 of those orange bottles, and I don't know. I didn't get interviewed for that. We don't have that, but obviously people are quick to take a pill for something. And the gist of this tonight, I think you'll agree, it's not about just going out and getting a bunch of nootropics and throwing them together and hoping you think more precisely or focus better or sleep better. It's not that at all. Is it, Lance, in closing? Because we're coming on an hour here, and I know we both got a jet soon.
I think it's like, what does a person want out of it? I think, if you don't have any trouble, to me, I really wanted extra focus, wanted extra concentration, motivation, and I saw very good results in a lot of these areas. Someone else, that may not be something they're too concerned with, but we can all agree as you get older, that your brain, your cognitive function declines. And if you can do things that are making your brain produce more of its own neurotransmitters instead of having that decline, just like you would want your own hormones to be producing, or if, they finally stop, then to, replace them. But again, I would think I would want my brain to be good as I get older. I'd want to be in a good mood. I'd want to eliminate as much depression, anxiety, and some of the depression and anxiety can be psychological factors. But if your neurotransmitters are lined up, it makes it a lot easier to deal with lots of things. So
I agree.
It's good. And yeah, the heavy dutier ones can give you stronger effects. But for the long term, I prefer just more of the natural. Let's make my body produce its dopamine, its serotonin, and let's find a dose, experimental. I feel good. I'm optimized now. Brain's working well. I'm getting things done. I'm eager to start a task where before maybe I'll do it later. I'm procrastinating. And then I'm doing it and can't finish the task. I like to write. I've been working a little bit on a book, and now, I'm able to just sit down and bang out several pages. And
maybe in this case, like you were saying earlier, where you're only journaling and you're going by how it helps you, kind of anecdotal evidence, how it, or empirical, how it affects you.
Right.
And some people always, what about the studies? Can you cite this reference? Sometimes you just got to go by that old Frank Zane thing that he told me a long time ago. He said, listen, if I'm doing something and the textbooks say it's wrong and it's biomechanically incorrect and this and that, and it's not proven, but it's not hurting me and I'm getting results, then that's what I'm going to do. So I think maybe on a case-by-case basis, and again, everyone, we're not giving any advice here as far as what you should implement. It's just information that you should research and discover what is best for you. And I think that's good. Lance always has. I always go to him to find out things that I'm lacking. He knows a lot of different things, and we'll definitely have him back on here. Anything else to add at the end here, Lance?
No, that's it, I guess.
We'll have you do the Clint Eastwood. We'll work the Clint. One quick story. Can I tell the Arnold story?
Yeah, okay. Which one? Backstage?
No, the telephone story there. Where you call the office. Is that okay?
Yeah, but they probably why I was calling his office. Yeah.
All right, we'll save it for next time. We'll leave it at this. Lance had a lot of dealings via his father somewhat. He's had dealings with Joe Weider, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Boyarko, Mike Menser, the whole litany of the best legends in bodybuilding ever. Stayed at their houses. He went to the movies with Joe. So there's a lot of good stories, but we'll make them relevant as far as information that is helpful to you with a fun twist. And he'll do an imitation or two next time. But for now, I know you've got some. What are you eating tonight? What's for dinner? I'll tell you what I'm having after you tell me.
Just gonna have some chicken, squash, zucchini salad, basically. Nothing.
Yeah, I'm pretty basic too. Chicken, potatoes, some type of green, and I don't know. It's boring, but it works. Listen, I got to tighten up. You're ahead of me, man. I've really slipped.
I haven't been to a gym in a few months, except for my little dumbbells I bought recently. And
we go for our walks at night. And Denise says, "There's the pool." I go, "I ain't gonna be laying next to that anytime soon." It's really rather disappointing. But then you got to resurrect. Listen, you can't. I'll leave you with this. You cannot get in shape unless you're out of shape, right?
Well, I should be getting into shape pretty soon then.
Yeah, I'm sure you will, my friend. All right, listen, we'll talk later, Lance. I'll let you go, and thank you so much. This was great, and we'll have you back real soon.
Sounds great.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, have a great night. Talk to you soon.